Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. We do have a quorum present, so I'd like to call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District. Meeting packet has been emailed out to all the commissioners, and the meeting has been properly warned and posted. First item on the agenda is the agenda itself. Are there any requests for changes or additions to the agenda? Sarah?
Yes, Paul, I'd like to, maybe it's a discussion point, but when we get to the item number 5, the preliminary budget, I'd like us to discuss whether or not we want to move forward with the acceptance tonight. We're not actually approving the budget tonight. The aim was for the board to accept the proposed budget, but there have been a couple of concerns or issues with the formatting of that budget. So I don't know if you want to have a conversation about that or to remove it at this point in time.
I think at this point I would say I would prefer to remove it from the agenda. I really don't have confidence that we should proceed tonight with the acceptance, and I think what you've indicated is you're not really prepared to make a presentation. So we'll still leave this on the agenda because we'll still have to talk about some logistical issues, I think, surrounding the budget, but just will be on notice that will not be requested to take action on the preliminary budget.
Okay, so that should be noted then as the change that the board action requested is we are not going to be requesting board action at this moment.
That is correct. Any other changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, then we'll proceed with the one notation when we get to item number 5. There'll be discussion but no action. Next item on the agenda, item number 2, is public comment period. Are there any members of the public present via Zoom or via the phone who wish to address the Board of Commissioners? There are no members of the public present in the CSWD meeting room.
There's one caller as an attendee. It's just a phone number, so I don't know who the person is.
Yeah, this is just Kelton on the phone.
Oh, hi, Kelton.
Welcome.
Should know your phone number by now, Kelton. Sorry about that.
No problem.
As there are no members of the public present in the meeting room, nor via telephone, nor via Zoom, I will close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda consisting of the minutes of the October 23rd, 2024 board meeting, the standard program update memos and charts, and the standard finance report consisting of the warrants, cash investment, and reserve balances. Any requests to remove any of these items from the consent agenda for further discussion? Sarah?
Paul, we just have an addition to the program updates, so I don't know if you want to pull that or just provide an update to the update.
Let's pull it because I'm not sure what it is, so we'll pull program updates and give you a chance in a moment. But any other requests to pull something from the agenda, from the consent agenda? Hearing none, items 3.1 and 3.3 of the consent agenda are accepted and approved. We'll now invite Sarah to just address us with program updates.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask Josh Esty to give a brief update on the MRF finances. Normally, I think the board will recall that normally the MRF financials are at least 1 to 2 months behind just due to the transfer of information and how things have to be verified. But we, thanks to Rick's eagle eye, we realized that we hadn't put an update in a few packets. So I just wanted to have Josh give a brief update as to where we are at the most recent numbers.
And again, for clarity, this is the current operating MRF. We're not talking about financials or projections for the new MRF construction. It's just
correct.
How the current MRF is performing. So, thanks. So we'll turn it over to Josh.
Yeah, and I just have numbers through September, and the 3 numbers that normally go into the packet are total inbound tons, total marketed tons, and then average ACR which is the average commodity rate. So essentially what we sell our commodities for per ton. So so far this fiscal year, we have 10,983 tons in. We have 8,840 tons out, and our average ACR so far through this fiscal year is $136.62, which is a very strong number. Sarah and I have chatted about program updates and these numbers in particular, and I'm going to be working on putting together sort of a long-term trend line for those three numbers, because without context, they don't really mean a whole lot unless we're kind of seeing them over a longer time. So hopefully for next board meeting, I'll have those numbers pulled together so you can kind of see the trends that we've been looking at over a longer length of time, so that we can, so we're not hyper focused on months numbers.
And that goes along, Paul, with our desire to update and modernize some of the charts and the graphs that are included in the packet. So that would be one of them that we would be looking to update.
Great. Yes, Josh, that finishes your presentations. We'll open it up for questions. Paul Staler.
Quick question, can you just refresh my memory and the board's memory as to what we budgeted for the ACR for this fiscal year?
I believe we budgeted the ACR at 85 this year, Sarah, is that right?
Yes, yes.
So we're significantly ahead of that for this quarter, or at least these first couple of months.
Yeah, and I'll give you just a little bit of context for why that number was where it was at, Paul and the board. The first half of last fiscal year, the average ACR was, I believe, around $90, and it started really low back in July of last fiscal year, and it crept up. And as you know, with sort of the schedule, the timeline for our budget projections, we are right in the thick of things where things were projecting to be better, but we weren't really comfortable with where they were going to go. And so certainly they were lower than the projections were lower than the actuals ended up being, but we'd rather be on that side of things certainly than the other side of things.
Ken, your hand is up.
Yeah, hey Josh, I noticed the number in was 10,000, the number out was 8,800 or something.
Yeah.
Is that a good percentage? And I wonder if that number is ever used to consider contamination rates, and does it ever lead to anything?
Yeah, it's also the glass, Ken. So it's inbound single stream, and then everything that gets marketed, and Casella does not market the glass for us. And so it's everything. I should have been more specific. It's what Casella markets for us outbound out of the MRF. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a big number. It's not all contamination. The vast majority of that is glass.
Is glass? No, actually, I thought it was a good number. I mean, I just remember it's never the same.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if we do better. Are we getting better at contamination or worse over time? And how does that?
Yeah, those numbers are pretty consistent.
Okay.
The different inputs are pretty consistent. So it's a pretty set ratio month to month.
Thank you.
Yep.
And the numbers that Josh just cited are roughly 25% of what we've budgeted. So the numbers in and out are corresponding pretty closely to our budget, 25% 1 quarter way through the year.
Any other questions or comments on the on Josh's update on current MRF performance numbers? Hearing none, then this was pulled from the consent agenda. This is informational. We'll note that it has been accepted as part of our packet, but we do not need to have a formal action to we don't need to take any action on this, on the program updates. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having that back in, hopefully starting next month. So I think we're ready then to move on to item number 4, which is the FY fiscal year 24 unaudited financials. I'll turn it over to Sarah and Nola, but I guess just for context again, just to remind some of the commissioners who might not attend regularly, our fiscal year runs from when to when. So even though we're kind of in the tail end of 2024, we have concluded our fiscal year 24. Could you just mention that at the beginning of your presentation, what months we're actually covering?
I'll turn it over to Nola to kick that off.
Is someone able to share the PowerPoint or?
Oh, yeah, Jimmy has to promote you. So our fiscal year is a July to June fiscal
Nola,
year.
you're not, sorry, Nola, you should be able to as a.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so our fiscal year runs July to June, and generally we are we're not always able to close out our year as of July of the next year because we do have, again, the Murph numbers are always the last ones to come in. As Josh mentioned, he only had up to September, so we tend to run 2 months behind. So our end of the year when we actually kind of close out the books is closer to September, later in September. So this is reflective of, again, July 1 of last year, 2023 to June 30 of 2024. And so Nola was going to go over that.
Great, thank you. Guess we're ready to turn it over to Nola for to walk us through it.
Okay. Let me just shuffle some things here. So as Sarah mentioned, our fiscal year is July 2023 to June 2024 for fiscal year 24. I did provide all this information, so I don't necessarily want to go through each and every number, but if there are questions, please feel free to ask along the way. I just wanted to provide the revenue sources sort of broken down, highlighting the higher numbers like tipping fees, solid waste management, sale of material. The other items include things like interest, the little bit of rent that we receive, fines, licensing, things of that nature.
I know, again, just to refresh all of us, tipping fees are fees that are paid to say at the drop-off centers and at the MRF when materials are deposited for at our facilities, and the solid waste management fee is the fee that's assessed on all materials that arrive at the Coventry landfill. Broad stroke.
Yes, that's correct.
Major sources of revenue for the district.
Right, it's jumping around on me here. So when we look at the actual versus budget, the overall total, we were pretty spot on. We're at that 100% mark, but there's a bit of variation within the actual sources themselves. Sale of material was a little higher than we expected, but we are always very conservative with that number because we're just not sure where the ACR will land year over year. And as far as the other, looking a little bit higher than the budget, and that's typically because of interest. It was unexpectedly high over the last fiscal year. We were investing quite a bit of money into treasury stocks, and those did significantly well. Additionally, the interest rates at both our checking and money market accounts are much higher than usual. Most of that occurred when it switched from being People's to being M&T. So we actually received a pretty significant bump just with our basic checking account monies. But a lot of that is from the treasury stock that we invested in. I wanted to provide a bit of a graph so you can sort of see how the actual, which is green, compares to the budget. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to digest this information when you see it visually. So you can see that almost across the board, the green is a bit higher than the blue, with the exception of some of those tipping fees. Our cost of goods sold include anything that is absolutely directly related to revenue streams. So that would include things like the organic material that we purchase to make our compost and other organic sales. We also include bins and containers in this section, even though we are not currently purchasing any new bins, and the intention is to basically get rid of whatever inventory we currently have so we can get out of the sale of bins. And then also whatever paint products we purchase throughout the year. Unfortunately, those aren't really directly, if I show them as a direct relation in any other way than just the dollar value, they seem quite extreme. You know, it looks like we don't pay hardly anything for the organics that we actually turn into revenue. But the truth is that most of that is actually coming through in the expense side of things. So you'll just see that one section for our cost of goods. These are our direct expenses, or I'm sorry, our indirect expenses. That includes things like payroll, travel and training, materials management, and that includes the costs that we would pay out to Casella, for example, for moving our material around. Property management includes any of the properties that we have remaining, and also the administrative building that we are currently leasing. Community support is in bulk the CCUF, the Community Cleanup Fund that we allocate out to our member towns. And there's a little bit of other things that you might find in there if we have to clean up Redmond Road or any of the other locations that we're required to clean up over the years. So when we look at that as a graph, we can see that you know, the bulk of our expenses are materials management, and then about a third of that is payroll, which is actually quite good considering we are primarily a service industry. Many service industries, payroll is about 50% of their source of expenses. When we look at that compared to our budget, you can see nearly every number is below our budgeted rate. So we do try to encourage the management team and our staff to limit our expenses as much as possible without, you know, causing any sort of safety concerns or preventing us from, you know, following through with whatever promises or promoting that we intended to do for the year. You can see that really the only two that are above 100% is equipment and fleet. Some of that is simply because we purchased more equipment to repair internally. So rather than it falling under professional fees or some other location, we're actually managing a lot of that internally with our staff. Additionally, you'll see that property management is a bit higher. And again, some of that is just due to us being at the new Gregory Drive location and not really knowing how expensive electric might have been. You know, we made some really good estimates for that. But with it being a new building, we weren't 100% sure of how much that may cost us over the course of the year. Overall, though, we are at only 94%, which means that we still could have spent about 6% of our budget had we wanted to reach that 100% mark. I wanted to provide again some graphs, and I split this up because payroll and materials management is a bit higher than the others, so it skewed it quite a bit. So I just wanted to show that our actuals in green are lower than our budget in blue here. And again, that's almost the same across the board, with just a little bit above for things like equipment and fleet, property management. But other than that, the green falls pretty far below the blue lines here. Just again, a summary that our revenue was 15.4, our cost of goods were about 100, our expenses were 13.5, and total income, or what I would consider excess money before the allotments and transfers, was about 1.1. So now I wanted to provide you with some information about how that 1.1 is allotted or transferred, and how we get to zeroing out our total budget at the end of every year. So I just wanted to remind everyone of what the departments were. These are the ones that are listed under what we consider administrative. Then we also have operating, and then separately as pass-through departments as biosolids and the closed landfill. So as far as our administrative, this is broken down into adding to the reserves. Solid waste management fee reserve received 3.6, the capital received 94,000, and facility closure received 170. Then we had a few allotments, which means that is money that departments needed in order to get themselves back to zero. So that was 2.7, and then the community cleanup fund is always pulled from the community cleanup reserve, and that was 31,000 spent in fiscal year 24. So here's a bit of a graph to help you sort of visualize what I just said. So you can see there's the solid waste management, and that's primarily the revenue source for the administrative departments. From there, things are allotted out to various departments, and then whatever is remaining falls into the solid waste reserve. The community cleanup expenses come out of the community cleanup reserve. And then we did have interest that we earned that actually all went to, actually, that's not quite true. The bulk of it went to the facility closure reserve. There was a little bit of interest, so there should be a little bit of an arrow going over to the capital reserve. And then we also had some capital gains. That's just items that, assets that we would have sold over the course of the year or disposed of with some sort of revenue involved in that. And any of those monies went into the capital reserve. Now there's the operating departments, and those are really the departments that actually are doing something beyond an administrative responsibility. Those include things like the MRF, the ORF, I'm sorry, not biosolids, the hazardous waste, things of that nature. So in this case, we added 1.8 to the operating reserves. The departments required about $1 million to fund them so that they could get to zero. We did pull a little bit of money out of solid waste management fee, and that was just for the bins. So if you recall, if you went back to the cost of goods slide, that was about almost $4,000. And because we are not really receiving any revenue for bins anymore, this was pulled from the solid waste management fee because it was meant for that sort of administrative responsibility that we had in the past. We also did have to pull some money out of the capital reserve. So again, here's just a visual of what that looks like. There was operating, any of the revenue that was generated through the operating departments, that was then allotted out to various departments, and whatever was remaining ended up in the operating reserve. We did take a little bit out of the solid waste management reserve to cover the cost of the bins, and then we had to take a little bit of money out of the capital reserve to cover any capital losses. So those would be fixed assets that we sold that maybe weren't depreciated correctly, or we had some sort of small loss on. So once we have collected all of the reserve sources, once we've moved monies back and forth in whatever fashion is required for the end of the fiscal year, and we've zeroed out the income statement, we then have what's left on the balance sheet within the reserves. So this is the these are the numbers of where we fall as far as the reserves. So we do have a significant amount of money designated for capital. We still have a nice amount sitting in operating solid waste. The facility closure is meant to cover any cost associated with having to close a facility and clean up any of the disposal debris, and to be sure that it's available for use that wouldn't necessarily be solid waste management. We do have a decent amount of money in the landfill post-closure, and that's because we are continuously adding to it and trying not to take quite as much out as we have in the past. Biosolids is passed through. We still had some money left in the community cleanup. And then, oh, I'm sorry, if you could ignore these last three lines here, those don't belong there. I apologize for that. I'm not sure why they're still sitting there. So overall, we're still doing quite well. The reserves are well funded, and we can actually potentially reduce some of these in fiscal year 25 if we'd like, because we have created some maximum values based on what we may need if we were to stop one of the facilities, or if for some reason we stopped receiving revenue from something like the solid waste management. And I do have information on that if you go back through some of the finance committees, and if anyone is interested in what we have coined the waterfall effect, I'm happy to share that information with you. So that was all. Are there any questions?
No, no questions here. Any commissioners via Zoom have any questions or observations? Ken, your hand is up. But you're muted.
I will just say that while I can't keep up with the pace and all the terminology, I did note in the memo that expenses were, I think, 6% below budget, and just a huge congratulations, because I know we passed the budget, so thank you very much for what everyone does to get there. Great job. Really appreciate you. Thanks, Nola.
And any other questions? I just wanted to take this, oh, Barb, your hand is up, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that that was an excellent report in the board packet. It was so clear, and I love the fact that you actually spelled out every acronym. Thank you.
Great comment. Paul?
I second that too. It was great to see a nice, concise format. I did have just one question, Sarah, regarding the post-closure landfill reserve and all. So I know you're keeping a close eye on this because you anticipate we're needing to continue our maintenance beyond the current federal requirement, I believe it is. I mean, do you project that's going to need to get even higher, say up to $1 million or something? I mean, what are your thoughts on where that's going to need to get to?
Yeah, that would be a comfortable place for us, if we could get it up to $1 million before we have to start spending it back down again. So one of the goals for the investments was to be able to have a steadier stream to put some money back into that fund that has been being depleted over the years, as it was designed to do. So because we're near the end of that 30-year requirement period, and we know that there are some likely to be some other requirements coming up based on whatever the EPA decides to do with PFAS, or what the state might decide to do with PFAS treatment, if we are required to treat at our level, we'll need to be prepared to have some funding available to implement whatever that is. But also, we do know that we're generating more leachate than we should be in a landfill of this age. So we are still in the year of study. We need to study how the landfill is behaving over the course of a year to be able to get that seasonal understanding of when leachate is being produced and in what quantities, and you know where it may be infiltrating in, if it's infiltrating in a place where it shouldn't be. So we're still in that study phase. In the late spring, we'll know much more, and Josh and Janine are working on that. So I think by next year, we're going to continue to try to fund that through our investments. And again, we just reinvested, the finance committee agreed to reinvest the 4.6 million in treasury bills. I initiated that today. So we'll get a little bit more. The interest rate's coming down, so it's certainly not as much as we had last year, but it's still better than not investing, which we had not done for a while. So I don't know that we'll be able to make up the 565 to $1 million by the time we would want to, which I think is the question you're really asking, Paul, is will we make it in time to $1 million before we need it? Probably not. I would anticipate in the next 5 years, we'll be told what we will need to do. So I'm not as sure that the investments alone will be enough. But we did increase the solid waste management fee in part to help fund that reserve. So anything that is above our waterfall amounts for the operating reserve or for the solid waste management fee reserve or for capital reserve, capital doesn't have a cap. We can decide to move, say if there's an excess in the operating reserve and we're comfortable that we're not going to need it over 2 million, we can move anything that's over the max into that closed landfill reserve to beef that up. So the good news is that we only have a couple of restricted reserves, right? So biosolids reserve is a restricted reserve account, which means it can only be used for the benefit of that program. So we cannot move biosolids reserve money out of that reserve for operating for CCUF, anything. It has to stay with biosolids. Once money moves into the closed landfill reserve, we have internally restricted it. So we are treating it as a restricted reserve, so that we know that money will be used for that program. Everything else is fluid and can move between reserves as needed. So that is the good news, is that we do have excess in at least certainly the operating reserve to be able to augment if the interest revenue is not going to get us to where we would ideally like to be by the time we need it to be there.
Thank you.
I just wanted to wrap up this part of the agenda in the meeting by just acknowledging that this is Nola's last meeting with us. Sarah has informed us, I think through the board just recently, that Nola has accepted another position elsewhere, and she will be drawing to a conclusion her 4.5 years of service to CSWD, and wanted to thank you for your service. I just wanted to quote a little bit from your memo here in the concluding section of your memo, which I think is a testament to the work that you've done. Fiscal year 2024 marked significant progress for the Chittenden Solid Waste District, both operationally and financially. Progressive use of upgraded financial and budget-specific software enabled better financial tracking, improving the alignment between budgeted and actual performance. And your statement, I take great pleasure in acknowledging the overall financial health of the district remains robust. And then further, you go on to say the balance sheet shows that CSWD is well positioned for future growth. Those both of those statements are very well received by me and I think by the full board, and I really appreciate all that you've done to make those statements very true, and keep CSWD moving on a great path forward. So thank you very much, and again, the best of luck
Thank you.
Your new endeavors.
Thank you.
I second that emotion.
We'll now move on to item number 5, the FY preliminary budget. And as acknowledged at the beginning of the meeting, we're actually not going to be taking any action on that tonight, but I did want to give Sarah an opportunity to just give a little more explanation and then map out where we go from here.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I apologize, my dear board, for needing to postpone this, and it will not be postponed for long. While the budgeting software is robust and helpful, it is not without its occasional glitches. And we noticed one almost right away after we sent it out last week, where in the fiscal 26 forecast, one of the items was being double counted. And so that we already recognized that there was going to be an issue there, but we felt okay sending that out because we saw that because it was a double count, that would actually reduce the amount of the projected shortfall. So we thought, well, that's fine. But also the actuals didn't pull from fiscal 24 did not pull correctly through the database. So the document you have, while the bottom line, for fiscal 26 will be close, the entire document is not as accurate as I wanted it to be for your receipt of the budget. So, I would like us to not, formally take action on this tonight. I would ask that although we do need to meet again, as a board prior to December 1st, which is complicated, matters because December 1st is a Sunday, and we have Thanksgiving next week. So, Amy or I will send out a request tomorrow morning, asking for board's availability for a very, very, very short meeting on either Monday or Tuesday, to basically accept this proposed budget for further development. And that's what this process is. The board accepts the budget, and then it comes back to staff for further development, and then it goes to the finance committee. The finance committee then goes through the budget line by line by line by line, and then provides additional feedback to staff, and then we take that feedback in, presents the roll up again, and then in March we will bring the budget for your authorization to be then distributed out to our member cities and towns for their approval, and that's kind of what kicks that off. So this is always just kind of a rough draft, but we try to get it as accurate as possible, so that there's really not much difference between the proposed budget and the one that we're asking you to send out for adoption. But because this document is not reflective of the level of accuracy I would like you to see, I'm asking that we meet again either Monday or Tuesday. That would be my preference. However, having heard that explanation, you may feel differently. So I'm very open to that conversation.
Paul Stabler?
I'm just going to add, for the board's purpose, for the new members, just the primary reason for this early approval is to let the towns know whether or not there will be an assessment from the district. And we have not had an assessment since like the third year of our existence or something like that. But anyway, so I'm sure we won't have one for, or correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but anyway, that is the prime motivator. They need to know when they start developing their budgets, whether there'd be an assessment from the district. So I'll just add.
That's correct. And we need to give them, it's also in our charter. So the board must receive a proposed budget by December 1. And that is the reason why, is that we can then notify our member cities and towns of a potential assessment, so they can incorporate that into their budgets prior to town meeting day.
And if I could just add a little bit of clarification, the payroll and benefits error that Sarah was pointing out, there was an overage, and then realizing that a position was also not included almost makes it a wash. So the roll up won't show much of a difference. And it's also a snapshot in time. So as an example, we ended that last Friday, but we know between now and January we'll have changes. So right now we have open enrollment for benefits, and after we sent the budget on Friday, for example, I had somebody say to me, oh, I am changing my benefit. And now that we know that, even though it's an 18-month budget, I've gone in and made that change. So there's already an additional change unrelated to an error being in the budget. So it is very close to what it is, but I understand that it's not exact. And it will be fluid all the way through January until we meet with the finance committee to say, this is now what we're going with as of that time. So it's fairly close, but we'll have additional changes along the way. So to Paul's point, it's for the assessment piece, but we can certainly attempt to pull together a fairly quick board meeting, hopefully between now and then, if that's the decision tonight.
Well, my recommendation is that when I hear two things, one, that there is fluidity, but then when I hear the word error, that concerns me a bit, and I think that we're a very well-run,
Yes.
accurate organization, and I would really like to give you the opportunity to hone that information so that you can present it to us, and we can act with the highest degree of confidence, not only to satisfy ourselves, but the constituencies that we represent. So I know this is a bit of, potentially a bit of an imposition on everybody's schedule, but I'm hopeful, confident that we can have a scheduled meeting early next week. And I know we have a lot of alternates tonight, and I really appreciate you coming and standing instead tonight in place of the regular commissioner. And I would hope that if regular commissioners who are not here tonight and are not aware and aren't aware of this until tomorrow morning, that you and your full commissioner can consult, and that one of you would be able to attend the meeting. As Sarah said, it will not be a long meeting, and this is not the final iteration of the budget, but it is an important step in the whole budgeting process. It's key that we get a quorum next week, and just ask everybody to take it to heart, see what your availability is, and again, when we re-meet, hopefully early next week, it will, that meeting will proceed smoothly and briefly. That's my speech to it. I don't know if there's any other concern about the action that I'm recommending the board take, or the path that the board follow. We're not taking any action tonight. I'm hearing none, no other recommendations to do other than what I'm recommending. So I think then we're ready to move on to item number 6, which is executive session for the purpose of discussing real estate transactions. We have a motion that could be read into the record to enter executive session.
Motion that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session to discuss real estate negotiations where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit authorized staff to be present for this session.
So move, South Burlington.
Second, Richmond.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that we enter into executive session. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? We will now enter into executive session. The executive session dealt with just informational items, no action being taken tonight as a result of our executive session. Last item on the agenda is other business. Is there any other business to bring before the Board of Commissioners tonight?
Paul, I just had 2 items that I wanted just to mention to the board. If I could, one item, and actually glad that Jennifer is there, Jennifer Getty is there. I wanted to make you aware that we recently had an issue at the Wilson Drop-Off Center with some credit card charges that had been double charged. It was an issue with the communication relay basically between our point of sale system and the credit card company, where the communication took too long to come back, that the approval took too long to come back. So it looked like the charge was not authorized. So the card we run through again, it was authorized, and then the original unauthorized one was then authorized. So the credit card company is going to be managing those double charges. They're going to be issuing the refunds directly to our customers. We unfortunately have no way of knowing who the individual customer was, because we don't get a name, we don't get the full credit card number, so we have no way to contact them. But in case you hear from any of your constituents that they were charged twice by CSWD, you know that we know, and that it is in the process of being rectified by the credit card company. So I wanted to make sure that, just in case you heard anything, that we're aware of that. Tom?
Can we put out some kind of a public notice to get somebody to step forward?
To step forward, what do you mean?
I mean, to just say, you know, we think that somebody was double charged, and if people can provide evidence that they were.
We have that. We have that evidence. We know they were. We have all of the transactions. We know which ones were doubled. We just don't know who the people are to be able to call them up and say, "Oh, Mr. Jones, we're so sorry. You had a double charge, and we're going to reverse that for you." It will automatically be reversed through the credit card company, and they'll see it on their statement. So they may not even notice it until they get their next statement. They'll see 2 charges and then a credit. So as far as kind of putting out a big wide announcement, was isolated to the one day, or maybe it was 2 days, but it was 1 or 2 days at one location. We've identified which customers are affected, sent that information to EVO. They're managing it and will be still within 5 to 7 business days.
Thank you.
And the other item I wanted to mention is that I sent out to you all a Front Porch Forum post, if you are feeling comfortable in doing that, to help us find our next director of finance. And thank you so very much to the early adopters who've already posted to your local Front Porch Forums. Thank you. I'm just always amazed by how quickly you take this up and take up the charge for me, and I appreciate that very, very much. And if you still want to do that, please feel free to send that in to Front Porch Forum over the next couple of days. We do have the deadline for submissions as the 29th. We recognize that we may extend that, but right now we're every place else that we posted, it says the deadline to apply is the 29th, so we're kind of keeping that for now. So if you can post in the next day or so, please do, and it will certainly help, because as I mentioned in my email, no one knows us better than our folks in Chittenden County, and I'm sure there is a diamond out there just waiting to know that we want them to come work for us. So thank you again for those folks who've already submitted the posts, and encouraging the rest to do so. That's it.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other business anybody wants to bring up? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Seth Burlington.
Second, Sherlock.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. We are adjourned.